To understand Valentine, you must first understand the mud. It is not merely a geological feature of the heartlands, it is the town's soul made manifest. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the environment is never a passive backdrop. It is an active, malevolent participant in the narrative. And in Valentine, the mud is the antagonist. It is a living, breathing entity that clings to everything it touches, an omnipresent force that dictates the very rhythm of life and death within its boundaries. It cakes on Arthur Morgan's boots, making every step a struggle, a visceral reminder of the earth's stubborn resistance. It splatters his horse's flanks, a constant battle against cleanliness and order. It stains the hemlines of the finest dresses worn by the town's few respectable women, mocking their attempts at refinement and civility. It is a constant, grinding reminder that this town, for all its pretenses of civilization, is built on something primal, dirty, and fundamentally unstable. The mud is the town's true skin, a thick, viscous layer that hides nothing and reveals everything about its character. Valentine is the first true town the Van der Linde gang encounters after their desperate descent from the frozen hell of the Grizzlies. Narratively, it is meant to be a reprieve, a moment of respite after the brutal, unforgiving wilderness of Amberino. The snow has melted, the sun is finally shining, and the green rolling hills of the heartlands stretch out like a promise of freedom and opportunity, a pastoral idyll after the stark white desolation. But consider the visual transition. We move from the purity of white snow, a harsh, cleansing cold that demanded simple, brutal survival, to the pervasive, clinging filth of brown mud. This isn't a clean break, it's a descent into a different kind of struggle. The civilization that Dutch van der Linde so despises is introduced not with the gleaming promise of Saint Denis, but with the squalor and moral ambiguity of a livestock town. The mud represents the moral ambiguity of the world the gang is re-entering, a world where the lines between right and wrong are as blurred and indistinct as the tracks in the mire. In the mountains, survival was simple. Don't freeze, don't starve, don't get caught by the O'Driscolls. In Valentine, survival requires navigating a cesspool of lies, greed and corruption, where the physical dirt mirrors the moral decay. The town itself is a study in architectural deception, a carefully constructed illusion designed to mask its true, grimy nature. It markets itself as a livestock town, a bustling hub of honest commerce where hard-working ranchers and drovers can sell their herds and spend their hard-earned coin. It projects an image of rustic simplicity, a place where the American dream is measured in heads of cattle and glasses of whiskey, where a man can make an honest living by the sweat of his brow. A working town for working folk, the slogan might go, echoing the frontier spirit. But this image is a veneer, as thin and brittle as the glass windows of Smithfield Saloon that get shattered every Saturday night, only to be replaced and shattered again. Valentine is not a town of innocence. It is a town of facade, a stage where the illusion of order is constantly performed. It is the exact point where the civilized world, with its nascent laws and burgeoning industries, grinds against the untamed frontier with its raw violence and lawless spirit. The friction between these two forces results in a grotesque spray of sparks and blood that constantly threatens to ignite the entire settlement. The layout of the town is deliberate, a physical manifestation of its inherent contradictions. It is dominated by one main street, a wide, unpaved avenue that is churned into a permanent quagmire by the hooves of 1,000 cows, the wheels of countless wagons, and the boots of every man, woman and child who passes through. This street is the stage for the town's daily theatre, a muddy artery through which all life and commerce flow. On one end sits the church, a small white wooden structure that looks almost embarrassed to be there, its steeple reaching tentatively towards a heaven that seems far removed from the earthly concerns below. On the other end, dominating the skyline and the soundscape, is the livestock yard, a sprawling complex of pens and chutes, a monument to the town's economic engine, and between them, fighting for the souls of the men who drift through, are the twin pillars of Western vice, Smithfield Saloon, a raucous den of iniquity, and the gunsmith, a purveyor of the tools of violence. The proximity is jarring, almost satirical. You can confess your sins on Sunday morning, seeking spiritual absolution, but you're likely to commit them again by Sunday night at Smithfield's, or perhaps even earlier, in a drunken brawl that ends with a visit to the gunsmith for more ammunition. This spatial arrangement underscores the town's moral dilemma, a constant tug-of-war between salvation and damnation, with damnation usually winning. Geographically, Valentine sits in a vulnerable position, a fact that would not be lost on the tactically astute minds of Dutch and Hosea. It rests in a shallow bowl or valley, surrounded on all sides by the high, rolling ridges of the heartlands. From a defensive perspective, it is a nightmare. There are no walls, no natural defences, no strategic choke points. It is exposed, open to attack from any direction. Anyone can ride in from any direction, unhindered and unseen until they are upon the town, and anyone does. It is a transient town, a waypoint for drifters, killers, hustlers and thieves, a temporary haven for those on the run or those seeking to exploit the frontier's opportunities. The population is in constant flux. You have the permanent residents, the shopkeepers, the sheriff, the doctor, but they are often outnumbered by the tide of strangers, the cowboys, the gamblers, the outlaws, and the prospectors passing through. This creates an atmosphere of aggressive anonymity, a tacit agreement not to pry. In Valentine, nobody asks too many questions about where you came from, because everyone is running from something. Everyone has a past they'd rather keep buried in the mud. This transient nature makes it the perfect hiding spot for the Van der Linde gang initially. They can blend in with the drifters, just another group of rough-looking men passing through. But it is also what makes it a trap, a gilded cage disguised as freedom. In a town of strangers, enemies can hide in plain sight, their intentions obscured by the constant flow of new faces. As we later see with the arrival of Leviticus Cornwall and the Pinkertons, the porous borders of Valentine mean that violence and retribution can spill in as easily as the rain, washing away any illusion of safety. If you use your binoculars from the vantage point of Citadel Rock, looking down at the town, it looks insignificant, almost quaint. It looks like a toy set, a collection of wooden boxes dropped haphazardly into the mud, easily overlooked. But this insignificant town is the crucible where the fate of the gang is sealed, where their grand plans begin to unravel. It is here that the illusion of their freedom first clashes violently with the harsh reality of the changing world, a world that is rapidly closing in on them. The sensory design of Valentine is meticulously crafted to evoke a specific feeling, visceral brutality, an unvarnished reality that assaults the senses. The soundscape is a cacophony, a constant assault on the ears. It is dominated by the bleating of sheep and the lowing of cattle, The mournful sounds of animals being herded to slaughter, a constant background noise that serves as a subtle memento mori, a reminder of the industrial scale of death that fuels the town's economy. Layered over this is the squelching of mud underfoot, the rhythmic hammering of the blacksmith, the distant clang of the train, and the raucous laughter and drunken shouts spilling from the saloons. The air is described and implied via visuals to be thick and heavy, filled with the pungent smell of manure, the acrid scent of unwashed bodies, the cloying sweetness of stale beer, and the sharp metallic tang of gun smoke. It is an assault on the senses, a deliberate attempt to ground the player in the physical nastiness of 19th century frontier life. There is no romanticism here, no idealized vision of the West. Unlike the operatic beauty of the snow-capped mountains or the gothic mystery of the Louisiana swamps, Valentine is mundane in its ugliness, a stark portrayal of the banality of the frontier. And it is within this banality, this everyday grime and grit, that the deepest horrors are hidden. The town is a living organism that eats innocence and excretes violence, a place where the ordinary becomes extraordinary in its capacity for brutality. While the mud sets the stage and the curse provides the atmosphere, it is the people of Valentine who truly populate this theatre of misery. Beyond the major players like Sheriff Malloy, the town is filled with minor NPCs who are written with a staggering amount of depth and specific tragedy. These are not just vendors, they are victims of the environment they inhabit. Take, for instance, the gunsmith, a man often overlooked as a mere mechanic for upgrading Arthur's weapons. His shop is a temple to the town's true religion, violence. But observe him closely. He is twitchy, paranoid. He constantly cleans his counter, wiping away phantom specks of dust, or perhaps gun oil. His dialogue loops suggest a man who is deeply uncomfortable with his own trade. "It's a dangerous world," he mutters, almost to himself. He profits from the fear that pervades the town, selling the very instruments that make the streets unsafe. He's a war profiteer on a microscale. His existence is a paradox. He sells safety, guns, but relies on danger to stay in business. If the town were truly safe, he would starve. Thus, he silently roots for the chaos. Across the street, we have the general store owner. He's a sharper, more cynical figure. He sells canned peaches and hair tonics with the same detached professionalism. But his inventory tells a story of the town's desperation. Look at the prices. A can of beans costs more here than in civilized places back east, implied by the inflation of the frontier. He is gouging the prospectors and the drifters. He knows that in a town like Valentine, supplies are life. He is the gatekeeper of survival. His interactions with Arthur are transactional and cold. He doesn't care if you live or die, as long as your coin is good. He represents the mercantilist soul of the town, cold, hard, and indifferent to suffering. Then there is the hotel owner. This man runs a flophouse for transients. His establishment is not a place of rest, it's a place of storage for human bodies. The rooms are small, the beds are lumpy, and the walls are paper thin. He hears everything. The snoring, the weeping, the illicit deals, the murders. He is the silent witness of Valentine. He knows more secrets than the sheriff, but he keeps his mouth shut because discretion is his business model. To him, the mud of the town is literal money. Every muddy boot that walks through his door pays a fee. We must also consider the stable hand. He is perhaps the only honest man in town, working with animals rather than people. But even he is touched by the town's grim reality. He sees the horses that come in, ridden hard, often wounded, sometimes stolen. He sees the cruelty men inflict on beasts. His dialogue is often gentler, more resigned. He cares for the horses because he finds them preferable to the men who ride them. He's a quiet tragedy, a man with a soft heart trapped in a hard town. And let us not forget the beggar, the blind man Cassidy. Though he roams, he is often found near the Valentine crossroads in early chapters. Is he truly blind? Or does he see more than anyone else? His prophecies are cryptic warnings about the future, about loyalty and betrayal. He is the Greek chorus of the heartlands, a ragged prophet standing in the mud, screaming the truth to people who only want to hear lies. His presence adds a layer of mystical realism to the town's social fabric. He is the physical embodiment of the curse, a man broken by the world yet seeing its hidden truths. Every NPC in Valentine, from the woman sweeping the porch to the drunk passing out in the alley, has a routine, a loop, a life. They wake up, they work, they suffer, they sleep. This cycle of mundane misery is the backdrop against which the Van der Linde gang's operatic tragedy plays out. The town is a machine that grinds people down, and the gang is just the latest raw material fed into its gears. But to stop our analysis at the surface level of mud and commerce would be to miss the spiritual undercurrent that pulls at the ankles of everyone who walks these streets. There is a reason the mud feels so hungry, a reason the storms feel so personal. Before there was a town, before the mud was churned by cattle and men, there was the land, and the land remembers. The violence of Valentine is not a new invention brought by the railroad. It is an inheritance. The foundation of the town is not wood and stone, but a deeper, older trauma that festers in the soil itself. To fully grasp the darkness that festers in Valentine, we must look backward, past the saloons and the sheriff's office, past the arrival of the settlers and the establishment of commerce, to the indigenous history that the town is built upon. This brings us to the most pervasive and chilling piece of lore associated with the area. A lore that suggests the very ground is rejecting the people who live on it. A spiritual sickness that permeates the soil. This is the curse of the heartlands. The Curse of Valentine is more than just a campfire story or a bit of flavor text. It is a narrative thread that weaves through the subconscious of the town, acting as a spiritual explanation for the relentless misery that seems to plague the area. If you spend enough time lingering near the campfire at the edge of town, or listening to the hushed whispers in the dark corners of the saloon, you will hear the locals speak of it. They talk of bad blood in the soil, of crops that wither without cause, and of a heaviness in the air that has nothing to do with the weather. They talk of strange noises carried on the wind, not just the howling of wolves or the rustle of the grass, but the screaming of human voices, crying out in a language that has been silenced by gunpowder and disease. The lore suggests that Valentine was built on the site of a massacre, and that the town is essentially a graveyard with a saloon built on top of it. The specific details of the curse vary depending on who is telling the tale, which is typical of oral history in a pre-literate or semi-literate society. However, the core narrative remains chillingly consistent. A native tribe, potentially a band of the Wapiti people or their immediate ancestors, was slaughtered here. Some versions of the story claim it was a dispute over land, a classic tale of settler encroachment meeting indigenous resistance. Others weave a more greedy narrative, claiming it was a betrayal over a discovered treasure or a gold deposit. A widely circulated newspaper scrap found in the game titled "The Curse of Valentine" explicitly mentions sightings of spectral canoes on the Dakota River and burning teepees appearing as mirages in the heat haze or the morning fog. These are not just ghost stories meant to scare children. They are the psychological scars of a genocide projected onto the landscape by a guilty collective conscience. The town is literally built on a foundation of bones. This foundation of blood sets the tone for everything that happens within the town limits. It suggests that the violence we witness, the bar fights, the duels, the hangings, the O'Driscoll raids, is not just human nature, but a supernatural inevitability. The land demands blood because blood was spilled to claim it. Furthermore, we must consider the perspective of the Wapiti people we meet later in the game. Rains fall and eagle flies represent the tragic end of this history, the final gasps of a dying way of life. But Valentine represents the beginning of that end. It is the civilized settlement that necessitated their displacement. Every wooden plank in Valentine, every nail driven into the church, is a monument to that theft. The curse can be interpreted materially as well as supernaturally. The town is cursed not by magic, but by its own origins. It is a boom town fed by the livestock trade, an industry that requires the conquest of vast grazing lands, lands that were stolen from the buffalo and the people who followed them. The economic success of Valentine is directly proportional to the suffering of the indigenous population. This guilt, repressed and ignored by the townsfolk, manifests as paranoia and superstition. They invent a curse to explain the bad things that happen, the sickness, the violence, the poverty, because acknowledging the reality that they are the beneficiaries of a massacre is too difficult. It is easier to believe in angry ghosts than to admit to being the children of monsters. To truly understand the curse of Valentine, one must close their eyes and listen. Rockstar's audio team created a soundscape for the Heartlands that is distinctly different from the other regions. In the Grizzlies, the wind howls like a wolf. In the bayou, the cicadas scream in a wall of noise, but in the Heartlands surrounding Valentine, the wind sighs. There is a specific, verifiable interaction in the game that chills the blood and lends credence to these whispers. If the player camps in the Heartlands near Valentine at night, particularly between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., they may hear a voice on the wind. It is a woman's voice, wailing in agony. It is faint, easily mistaken for the wind whistling through the trestle bridges, or the groan of settling wood, but distinct enough to make the hair stand up. Audio analysis of these files, extracted by data miners, reveals that they are labelled with terms like ghost wail and spirit cry, confirming that these are not merely ambient wind effects but deliberate sound cues meant to evoke supernatural presence. This auditory hallucination, or reality, aligns perfectly with the local legend of the Owl Hoot massacre. The legend states that the spirits of the dead assume the form of owls to watch the living. The owl is a complex symbol in many indigenous cultures, often associated with death, omens, or the transition to the afterlife. The fact that the local bandit gang is named the Owl Hoot Gang creates a linguistic tapestry of death surrounding the region. Are they named after the place, or are they named after the feeling? Furthermore, consider the ecology of the curse. The flora around Valentine is deceptive. The fields are lush with Indian tobacco and yarrow, plants traditionally used for healing and ritual. Their abundance in a place of such death is a cruel irony. The land is trying to heal itself, offering medicine, but the people just trample it into the mud. The Lucky's cabin site, Edmund Lowry's lair, is situated in a depression in the land, a topographical scar where the light seems to dim. The trees there are gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. This is classic environmental storytelling, the corruption of the soil reflecting the corruption of the soul. The curse is also reflected in the weather patterns. Valentine seems prone to sudden, violent thunderstorms that turn the streets into rivers of mud in minutes. These storms are not just weather, they're cleansing rituals. The rain tries to wash the town away, but the town, stubborn and hateful, clings to the earth. The lightning strikes the church steeple with alarming frequency, a scripted event that can happen, as if God himself is trying to smite the hypocrisy of the town's spiritual centre. Even the wildlife behaves strangely. The coyotes around Valentine are bolder, their yips sounding more like laughter. The crows gather on the saloon roof in unnatural numbers. If you pay attention to the suspicious activity blips on the minimap, there are more corpse-found events in the heatlands than almost anywhere else. Travellers murdered on the road, bodies dumped in ravines. The curse isn't just a story, it's a statistical probability of death. This indigenous context recontextualizes the entire Chapter 2 experience. When the Van der Linde gang sets up camp at Horseshoe Overlook, they are essentially occupying a haunted house. They're gazing down at a cursed city. Dutch van der Linde, who prides himself on his respect for natural ways and his critique of industrial civilization, fails to see the supreme irony of his position. He brings his own tribe, a motley crew of outcasts and rebels, to a place where a tribe was destroyed. He thinks he can navigate this world, that he can outsmart the Pinkertons and the Cornwallis, but he is walking into a trap set by history itself. The Curse of Valentine isn't just about ghosts, it's about the cyclical nature of violence in the West. The conquerors become the victims, the hunters become the prey, and in Valentine, everyone is prey eventually. Even the gang members sense this wrongness, though they may not understand its source. Listen to the camp conversations. Karen Jones and Mary Beth Gaskill, distinct sets of ears and intuition in the camp, often discuss the feeling of the place. Karen, often drunk but sharply perceptive, mentions that the town feels off, like it's watching them. Mary Beth, writing her romances, senses a tragedy in the air. It's like something bad happened here, she might say, staring into the fire. Something that never got fixed. These aren't just throwaway lines, they are the writers of Red Dead Redemption 2 acknowledging the subtext. The gang is camping on the edge of a graveyard and they are surprised when death comes knocking. The curse also manifests in the physical health of the town's inhabitants. Look at the number of sick, maimed or mentally unstable individuals in Valentine. Thomas Downs is dying of tuberculosis. Sheriff Malloy is consumed by lust and rage. Mickey, the veteran, is broken in mind and body. The raccoon hat guy is raving mad. It's as if the town acts as a magnet for broken souls, or perhaps the town breaks the souls that enter it. The curse is a miasma that infects everyone. It's not just about the dead Indians, it's about the living rotting from the inside out. In this light, Arthur Morgan's contraction of TB in this precise location feels less like bad luck and more like destiny. The curse of the land, the bad blood, enters his lungs. The violence of the settler, Arthur beating Downs, interacts with the sickness of the victim, Downs coughing, creating a fatal bond. Arthur becomes the carrier of the curse, taking the rot of Valentine with him for the rest of his short life. He becomes a walking testament to the town's poisonous legacy. a dead man walking who was killed not by a bullet, but by the very air of the heartlands. Thus, the curse of Valentine serves as the foundational myth of the area. It explains the mud, the violence, the sickness, and the doom. It is the original sin of the region, a bloody stain that cannot be washed away, no matter how much whiskey is poured on it or how many prayers are said in the little white church. Malloy's office is a 2-story wooden structure that sits centrally in town, a panopticon of sorts. The ground floor is public. The jail cells, the desk, the bulletin board of bounties. It is the stage where he performs the role of sheriff. But the second floor is his private domain, and it is here that the facade crumbles. Law hunters who have spent time eavesdropping near the sheriff's office know that Malloy is a man of deep, violent contradictions. He's engaged in a sordid affair with a married woman, Moira Calthorpe. This isn't just a rumour. It is a verifiable narrative arc that plays out purely through audio cues and environmental storytelling. If you stand outside the back of the office, you can hear them arguing. Moira's voice is desperate, pleading. She feels the guilt of her infidelity, the shame of betraying her husband. Malloy's voice, in contrast, is dismissive and aggressive. He isn't a lover comforting a distressed partner. He is a predator managing a complication. The arguments escalate over time. In one chilling sequence, the shouting stops, replaced by the unmistakable wet sounds of strangulation, thumping against the floorboards, a stifled gasp, then silence. It is a moment of horror that rivals anything in a horror game, made worse by the fact that it happens in broad daylight, while the town bustles on outside. Did Malloy murder her? The game leaves it ambiguous enough to be maddening. Moira is never seen again. If you loot Malloy later, you can find a letter from her, a desperate missive that confirms the toxic nature of their relationship. "I have disgraced myself," she writes. Malloy didn't just break the law of adultery, he likely broke the law of murder, the very thing he hangs others for. His hypocrisy extends to his professional conduct. Valentine is plagued by O'Driscolls. They hang around the livestock yards, they drink in the saloon, and they run an illegal money laundering operation out of the back of the doctor's office. Is it plausible that the sheriff of a small town is unaware that his local doctor is installing steel doors and shuttered windows? Unlikely. The law implies heavily that Malloy is on the take. He ignores the O'Driscolls because they pay him to look the other way. He ignores the rustling at the livestock yards until Arthur and John make it too obvious, because the auctioneer cuts him in. Malloy represents the institutional corruption that plagues the civilized West. He provides the appearance of order while profiting from the chaos. This corruption makes him a dark mirror to Arthur Morgan. Both men are killers. Both men live outside the bounds of conventional morality. But Arthur is honest about what he is. He calls himself an outlaw. Malloy hides behind a badge. In the ecosystem of Valentine, the law is just another gang, one that has better PR and a steady paycheck. When Arthur eventually kills Malloy, as many players do on a rampage, it doesn't feel like killing a peacekeeper. It is a closed loop of criminality, where the sheriff, the O'Driscolls and the outlaws dance together in the mud, trading money, secrets and lives, while the honest folk of Valentine keep their heads down and pray the curse doesn't come for them next. While Malloy is the face of the law, his deputies frame the reality of its enforcement. These often nameless NPCs are fascinating studies in visual character design. Unlike the uniformed, rigid police force of St. Denis, who resemble a modern urban police department, The Valentine deputies are a motley crew of hired guns. One deputy is often depicted as older, heavy-set, with a stained shirt and a tired demeanour. He represents the laziness of the law, the man just doing a job for a paycheck. Another is often leaner, meaner, with a quick hand near his holster. He represents the violence of the law, the man who enjoys the power the badge confers. Watch them. Their idle animations tell a story of boredom punctuated by adrenaline. They lean against posts, spit tobacco, and gossip about the townsfolk. They are not guardians, they are occupiers. They treat the town not as community they serve, but as a herd they manage. And when the shooting starts, notice their tactics. They are not brave. They take cover, they shout in panic. They are not the heroes of a Western. They are the terrified employees of a corrupt system. The bounty hunting mechanic serves as a primary interaction point with the law, and the wanted posters themselves are artifacts of law. Read the text closely. Benedict Albright. A snake oil salesman wanted for selling miracle tonics that cause death and blindness. His crime is capitalist fraud, a reflection of the town's commercial dark side. The fact that the sheriff pays to have him brought in alive suggests a desire for public spectacle. A hanging for a fraudster satisfies the mob's bloodlust more than a shootout. Eliane Swan, a woman wanted for killing her lover. The text describes a crime of passion, mirroring Malloy's own dark affair. The irony is staggering. Malloy pays you to capture a woman who killed her lover, while he himself, likely, killed his. He is punishing her for his own sins. The poster mentions she is armed and dangerous, projecting his fear of women onto her. Robbie Laidlaw, a member of the Owl Hoot gang, there's that name again, wanted for robbery and murder. His poster emphasises the danger of the roads, reinforcing the siege mentality of the town. The jail itself is a micro-ecosystem. If you capture a bounty alive, you can visit them in the cell. They don't just stand there, they plead, they bargain, they curse you. "You're a dead man, Morgan," they scream, or "I have money hidden, I can pay you." This interactive dialogue reinforces that these are human beings caught in the gears of the law, and sometimes you can witness the end of the line, the public hanging. These scripted events are disturbing in their casualness. A scaffold is erected in the muddy street, often near the bank, linking money and death. The town gathers, it's an event. People bring their children. The dialogue of the crowd is chilling. Hope he twitches, one might say. About time they strung him up. This reveals the true darkness of Valentine's citizenry. They aren't just victims of the curse, they are participants in the blood ritual. They crave the violence. The snap of the neck is followed by applause, then a quick dispersal to the saloon. The show is over. The mud claims another. Finally, consider Malloy's gun. It's a Schofield revolver, often customised with engravings, if you look closely in photo mode or loot it. A lawman on a modest salary shouldn't be able to afford a custom engraved piece like that. It is a symbol of his vanity and his corruption, a gun bought with blood money, used to uphold a lie. If the sheriff's office is the head of Valentine, Smithfield's saloon is its heart, and its liver, and its spleen. It is a massive, sprawling structure, the social gravity well of the town that pulls in every soul within a 10-mile radius. Unlike the smaller, dingier establishment across the street, Keen's Saloon, which caters to the quietly desperate and the five-finger fillet enthusiasts, Smithfield's is the place to be. It is the premier social hub of the Heartlands, It is always loud, always crowded, and always teetering on the verge of a riot. The architecture itself tells a story of heavy use and abuse. The floorboards are permanently stained dark with a mixture of tracked-in mud, spilled beer, tobacco spit, and dried blood. A forensic map of the town's Saturday nights. The windows are perpetually grimy, filtering the sunlight into a hazy golden dust that dances in the air, giving the room a deceptively warm, almost cinematic glow. But breathe in, and that glow tastes like stale whiskey and unwashed bodies. The piano player, a man with the patience of a saint and the fingers of an automaton, hammers out jaunty, discordant tunes that try and fail to drown out the shouting, the cursing, and the breaking of glass. Smithfields is the setting for Americans at Rest, a mission that serves as the player's true introduction to the social hierarchy of Valentine. The mission begins simply enough. Arthur, Dutch, Javier, and Charles are having a drink. But the peace is fragile. The fight that erupts is not over a major grievance. It starts over a look, a bumped shoulder, a drunkard's misplaced pride. This is Valentine in a nutshell, a powder keg waiting for a match. The brawl that follows is chaotic, messy, and visceral. It spills out of the saloon and into the mud, a visual metaphor for the town's inability to contain its own violence. It is here that we meet Tommy, a hulking brute of a man who serves as the game's first boss fight. Tommy isn't just a big guy. He is a symbol of the town's raw, stupid violence. He doesn't fight with technique or honour, he fights with mass. He is a wall of meat that Arthur must dismantle. The fight with Tommy is significant because of how it ends. Arthur beats him senseless, causing severe brain damage. As later dialogues with NPCs confirm, Tommy becomes a quiet vegetable of a man. The violence is shocking in its brutality. Arthur slamming Tommy's face into the mud, the wet thud of fist on bone. And who stops the fight? Not Sheriff Malloy, not the bartender, it is Thomas Downes, the gentle, coughing man who intervenes begging for peace. This triad, Arthur the aggressor, Tommy the brute, Downes the peacemaker, encapsulates the moral struggle of the entire game. And it all happens in the shadow of Smithfields, the temple where these violent men come to worship. But the saloon is more than just a fight club. It is a theatre of the absurd, populated by a cast of recurring characters who fleshes out the world. Sit at a poker table and listen. You might encounter John, better known to the community as the raccoon hat guy. John is a relic of the old frontier, a mountain man who has been left behind by civilization. He rants drunkenly about politics, history, and the softness of modern men. "They don't make men like they used to," he screams at the ceiling. "We're a nation of weaklings." His diatribes are funny, but they are also tragic. He represents the curdled rage of a generation that conquered the West, and now has nothing left to do but drink itself to death in a muddy town. If you fight him, and take his unique raccoon hat, he becomes a recurring nemesis. In future visits to the saloon, if you are wearing his hat, he will attack you on sight. This creates a personalised, emergent narrative. A feud born not of plot, but of a hat. Then there is the barber, Quentin Fern, tucked away at the corner of the saloon. In the timeline of 1899, the barber and the saloon are chemically fused. Fern is the town's news hub. He cuts hair, shaves beards, and bleeds information. He knows who is sleeping with whom, who owes money to whom, and which way the wind is blowing. Through him, the player learns the texture of the town's daily life. And moving through the crowd, you have the prostitutes. They are not merely set dressing. They have their own dark stories. One specific random event involving a prostitute in Smithfields highlights the utter depravity that the town can normalise. A woman, often referred to as the killer prostitute by the community, approaches Arthur in a panic. She claims to have killed a client in self-defence in one of the upstairs rooms. She asks for help. If Arthur agrees, he finds the body of a man in the room. The woman, clearly unstable and desperate, begs Arthur to dispose of it. The solution? Feed it to the pigs. Arthur carries the corpse out the back door through the mud to the pig pen behind the sheriff's office. The irony of the location is palpable. As the pigs consume the evidence, the woman pays Arthur a few dollars, blood money in its purest form, world that wants them dead. It is a house of sin not because of the gambling or the drinking, but because it sells the seductively dangerous lie that outlaws can ever truly be at rest. It captures them in its amber glow, extracts their coin, and then spits them out into the mud, leaving them dirtier and emptier than they were before. To understand the saloon is to understand what it sells. It sells survival, distraction, and intimacy, all at a markup. First, look at the menu. You can order food at the bar. The options are basic. Oatmeal, 3 pounds raw. Beef stew, 5 pounds raw. Lamb's fry, €3.50. In 1899, £3 for a bowl of oatmeal is highway robbery. Adjusted for inflation, that's nearly 100. This pricing structure isn't just a game balance mechanic, it's a law detail. It confirms that Valentine is a boomtown economy where prices are inflated because demand outstrips supply, and because the saloon has a monopoly on warm food. Watch the animation of Arthur eating. He shovels the stew into his mouth, wiping his beard with a dirty sleeve. It's primal, it's fuel, not cuisine. The lamb's fry, testicles, is a specific cultural nod to the livestock industry, eating the cast-offs of the trade. This transactional intimacy is the perfect segue into the broader machinery of the town. If the saloon is where money is wasted, we must ask, where is it made? The economy of Valentine is seemingly simple: cattle, sheep, and the men who herd them. It is marketed as the livestock capital of the heartlands, a title that suggests industry, prosperity, and a certain rugged honesty. The sprawling livestock yards, a labyrinth of wooden fences, muddy pens, and the constant lowing of animals, stand as the town's most prominent landmark, a monument to its economic engine. Here, life is literally converted into dollars, a brutal, efficient process that underpins the entire settlement. But beneath the pervasive smell of manure and hay, beneath the veneer of honest commerce, lies a complex predatory web of exploitation, theft, and corporate warfare. In Red Dead Redemption 2, honest work is rarely profitable without a little grease on the wheels, and the grease in Valentine is almost always blood, or at the very least the moral compromise that leads to it. The town's economic success is built on a foundation as unstable and morally ambiguous as its physical mud. The Van der Linde gang, perpetually in need of funds to fuel Dutch's increasingly elaborate and delusional plan, finds itself drawn into this economic maelstrom. Their initial forays into Valentine's commerce are not grand heists, but rather small-scale criminal enterprises that expose the town's inherent corruption. The mission, The Sheep and the Goats, serves as a brutal introduction to this reality. Arthur Morgan and John Marston, two of the gang's most capable enforcers, are tasked with rustling a herd of sheep. The setup is deceptively pastoral. They ride out into the rolling heartlands, locate the herd, and then, under the cover of night, begin the arduous process of herding the animals through the wilderness. This segment of the mission offers a fleeting, almost melancholic glimpse of the life they could have had if they weren't outlaws, a life of honest, if grueling, cowboy work. The quiet rhythm of the herd, the vastness of the open land, the shared task between two men who, despite their differences, are bound by a common purpose. It's a moment of relative serenity, a brief respite from the constant violence and paranoia that defines their existence. However, this illusion of simple, rugged work shatters the moment they arrive at the Valentine auction yard. The auctioneer, an unsavoury character named Morris Peyton, immediately recognises the sheep as stolen. There's no pretense, no feigned ignorance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scan the herd and he knows. But instead of calling the law, instead of acting as an upstanding citizen reporting a crime, Peyton sees an opportunity. He doesn't demand the return of the livestock, he demands a cut. 18%, he haggles, his voice a low conspiratorial murmur. This negotiation is profoundly telling. It implies that fencing stolen livestock is not an anomaly, but a standard, almost institutionalized part of doing business in Valentine. The auction house isn't a victim of crime. It is an active, willing accomplice, a crucial cog in the town's criminal economy. This institutional corruption mirrors the bribery and moral decay of Sheriff Malloy, who turns a blind eye to the O'Driscolls and other illicit activities for his own profit. The entire town, from its law enforcement to its central commercial hub, functions as a machine designed to launder dirty money into clean commerce, blurring the lines between legitimate enterprise and outright criminality. The blood money of Valentine isn't just earned through violence, it's earned through the systemic exploitation of every loophole and every moral failing. The land, which the curse of Valentine suggests demands blood, now demands money, and the town is more than willing to provide it, no matter the cost. But the true antagonist of this economic story, the force that truly embodies the changing world and the inevitable doom of the Wild West, is not a small-time crook like Peyton. It is the titan of industry, Leviticus Cornwall. Cornwall represents the relentless, unstoppable march of the modern world, a world of railroads, oil and sugar, capital with a capital C, an entity far more powerful and insidious than any outlaw gang. For much of Chapter 2, Cornwall is a distant, almost abstract threat, a name whispered in hushed tones, a symbol of the forces closing in on the gang. We see his name emblazoned on train cars, hear of his vast holdings, but he remains largely unseen, a looming shadow. In Valentine, however, Cornwall becomes a terrifyingly physical reality. After the sheep auction, Dutch van der Linde and Leopold Strauss, ever the strategists, wait for Arthur and John at Keen's Saloon, the smaller, less rowdy establishment across from Smithfield's, perhaps chosen for its lower profile and perceived anonymity. But there is no low profile when you rob a tycoon of Cornwall's stature. His reach is long, his resources seemingly limitless. Cornwall arrives not with the local law, which he likely views as inefficient and easily corrupted, but with his own private army, Pinkerton agents and heavily armed security personnel. He stands outside the saloon, a figure of imposing wealth and righteous fury, demanding Dutch van der Linde. This confrontation is one of the most thematically dense and pivotal moments in the game. It is a direct clash between two opposing ideologies, two dying eras. You have Dutch, the charismatic anarchist, the self-proclaimed philosopher outlaw who believes in a romanticized vision of freedom and self-reliance, facing off against Cornwall, the ruthless capitalist, the embodiment of industrial progress and corporate power. They are, in a twisted sense, two sides of the same coin, both men who take what they want through force, through intimidation, through a profound belief in their own right to dominate. But Cornwall has the legitimacy of the nascent state behind him, the backing of a system that is rapidly consolidating power and crushing dissent. "I am a man of business," Cornwall shouts, his voice booming with self-assurance and indignation. Dutch's reply, unspoken but powerfully felt, is that he too is a man of business. His business just happens to be robbery, a more direct, less sanitized form of wealth acquisition. The ensuing shootout is a cataclysm. It shreds the town, tearing apart the innocent facade of Valentine. The Maxim gun, a symbol of industrial warfare and overwhelming force, mounted on a wagon, unleashes a torrent of lead, transforming the quaint main street into a war zone. The mud, Valentine's omnipresent feature, is churned not just by hooves and wheels, but with blood, a literal manifestation of the town's violent nature. The gang escapes, but the message is clear, stark, and undeniable. Valentine is no longer safe. The war has come to Main Street, and it is a war the gang, with their antiquated methods and romantic ideals, cannot hope to win against the might of men like Cornwall. This confrontation marks the beginning of the end for the Van der Linde gang's illusion of freedom and invincibility. Yet before this explosive exit, before the full weight of Cornwall's wrath descends upon them, the gang launches one final, audacious strike against the town's economy, the robbery of the Bank of Valentine. The mission Sodom back to Gomorrah is a masterpiece of heist design, a meticulously crafted sequence that stands in stark contrast to the disastrous Saint Denis bank robbery later in the game. The Valentine heist is successful precisely because it is small, precise, and targeted. It is quintessential outlaw work, a testament to the gang's skills when they operate within their means, rather than the grand, delusional warfare Dutch later favours. It's a final, desperate attempt to secure the funds necessary to escape the tightening noose of civilization. The heist begins with a crucial choice, a moment that highlights the weaponization of femininity in the patriarchal West. Karen Jones. She can play the drunken harlot, loud and boisterous, drawing attention with her outrageous behaviour, or the lost little girl, feigning distress and vulnerability to elicit sympathy. This choice is not merely cosmetic. It underscores Karen's intelligence and adaptability, her ability to manipulate the town's prejudices that women are either whores or damsels against it. Her performance, regardless of the chosen persona, is brilliant, a testament to the raw talent and cunning that is often overlooked or wasted within the gang's increasingly desperate circumstances. While the bank guards are distracted by her captivating, if fabricated drama, Arthur, Bill Williamson, and Lenny Summers slip into the bank, their movements swift and practiced. Once inside, the cracking of the safes offers another binary choice, one that is deeply symbolic of Arthur's internal struggle and the gang's broader identity crisis. The player can opt for the quiet, methodical approach of safe cracking, a delicate dance of tumblers and tension, requiring skill and patience. This path represents Arthur as a professional thief, a man of craft and precision, a master of his trade. The sensory details are intimate, the faint clicks of the tumblers, the subtle vibrations, the held breath, the palpable tension in the air as the mechanism slowly yields. It is a violation of the town's sanctity, a quiet theft of the hard-earned savings of ranchers and shopkeepers, a surgical removal of wealth. Alternatively, the player can choose the loud, violent approach of dynamite. This path represents Arthur as a brute, a man of destruction, relying on brute force rather than finesse. The explosion rocks the building, shattering windows, sending debris flying, and instantly alerting the law to their presence. It is an act of terror, a chaotic, destructive assertion of power. Regardless of the method, the result is the same. The gang rides out with the town's wealth, leaving chaos and destruction in their wake. But the victory, despite the adrenaline and the successful escape, is profoundly hollow. They steal thousands of dollars, a fortune that in any other context should buy their freedom, a fresh start. Yet, it changes nothing. They're still on the run, still pursued, still trapped by the relentless forces of the changing world. The money goes into the camp box, a bottomless pit that never seems to be enough for Dutch's ever-evolving, increasingly fantastical plan. The illusion of freedom that the money promises is fleeting, a cruel mirage. The heist, for all its brilliance, only serves to highlight the futility of their efforts, the inescapable nature of their predicament. And finally, strictly tied to the economy of Valentine, and perhaps the most tragic and ironic consequence of the gang's time there, is the debt collection from Thomas Downs. Immediately after the high of the bank robbery, the adrenaline still coursing, the gun smoke still lingering, the taste of success still fresh, Arthur returns to camp only to be sent by Strauss to collect a paltry debt from a struggling farmer. He goes from being a legendary bank robber, a participant in a grand, if doomed, enterprise, to a petty thug beating a sick man for a few dollars. It is a narrative whiplash that defines the tragedy of Arthur Morgan, a stark illustration of the moral compromises and indignities he is forced to endure. He risks his life for the big score that ultimately means nothing to his personal freedom or the gang's survival, and he loses his life for the small score that, in a cruel twist of fate, means everything. This encounter at Downs' ranch is not just a plot point, it is a spiritual failing, a moment of profound moral decay that seals Arthur's fate. Arthur, acting as the ultimate agent of a corrupt system, Strauss's usury, which preys on the desperate and the vulnerable, beats a man who is already dying. He threatens Downs' wife and son, embodying the very brutality he often despises in others. Downs, a failed farmer crushed by the economic machinery of Valentine, by the unforgiving nature of the Heartlands, is already a victim. Blooded and coughing, he essentially defeats Arthur with a biological weapon. "I am sick," Downs warns, his voice raspy, his body racked with disease. But Arthur, blinded by his duty and his own hardening heart, doesn't listen. The splashing of blood on Arthur's face, a visceral, sickening detail, is the precise moment the game pivots from a Western adventure to an inescapable tragedy. It is the moment the curse of Valentine becomes personal, biological, and irreversible. And it happens because of a few dollars owed to a loan shark operating out of Valentine. The town's pervasive greed, its systemic exploitation, its moral rot, is the ultimate catalyst for the protagonist's death. The blood money of Valentine comes with a terrible interest rate, and Arthur Morgan pays it with his life, a slow, agonizing payment that defines the remainder of his journey. The curse of Valentine isn't just the ghost in the woods, it's the tuberculosis in Thomas Downs' lungs, waiting to be coughed into Arthur's face, a silent, deadly testament to the town's poisonous legacy. The systemic nature of this greed is best understood by looking at the specific price of a life in 1899. To understand the desperation of the gang and the townsfolk, we must crunch the numbers. The economy of Red Dead Redemption 2 is a strange mix of historical simulation and gamified inflation, but looking at it closely reveals the value of a human life in Valentine. When you loot an O'Driscoll after a shootout, what do you find? Gold wedding ring, $6 rare. This implies the O'Driscoll killed a married man or woman. It's a trophy of a destroyed family. Platinum pocket watch, $12, a symbol of wealth and status, likely taken from a traveller or a businessman. Opened miracle tonic, Royal 50, trash, the dregs of addiction. Now, compare this to the cost of living. A night at the hotel is $1. A meal is $3 to $5. A good horse is $150. The bank heist in Valentine yields roughly $20,000, split between the gang with the player taking a cut. In $1899, this is a fortune. Adjusted for inflation, it's roughly $500,000. This context is crucial. The gang isn't stealing pocket change. They're extracting the entire accumulated wealth of the region. The fact that this still isn't enough for Dutch, we need more money, highlights the impossibility of his dream. No amount of money is enough because his problem isn't financial, it's existential. We must also analyse the doctor's office robbery. This side activity is a microcosm of the town's corruption. You find the back door is locked. You knock. A voice tells you to go away. You see the O'Driscolls inside through the window. When you force the doctor to open the door, the dialogue is telling. He isn't just scared, he is guilty. "They made me do it," he cries. Inside, you find a Schofield revolver and a pile of cash on the table. This isn't a doctor's office, it's a bank vault for criminals. The loot you take from here feels heavier than usual. You're robbing the robbers, but you're also destroying the town's only medical facility. In the shootout that follows, you likely kill the deputies who come to protect the illegal operation. The irony is total. It is here, in the analysis of loot and theft, that the true nature of Valentine reveals itself. It is a town that eats its own. But even this, the corruption, the theft, the violence, is rational in a twisted sense. It is driven by greed, a human motivation we can understand. However, there are darker things in the Heartlands, things that defy rational explanation and speak to a deeper, more primal sickness in the earth itself. While the greedy machinations of Leviticus Cornwall and the brutal profiteering of the O'Driscolls represent the visible, external threats to Valentine, a deeper, more primal evil lurks just outside the town limits, festering in the dark corners of the Heartlands. This is the realm of Edmund Lowry Jr., the serial killer whose trail of mutilated corpses serves as the game's darkest and most disturbing subplot. The American Dream's Stranger mission is not merely a side quest, it is a journey into the heart of madness, a descent into a psychological abyss that is inextricably linked to the geography and spiritual decay of Valentine. Lowry is not a bandit or an outlaw in the traditional sense. He doesn't kill for money, for territory, or for survival. He kills for art, or rather, a twisted, grotesque parody of art. The clues to his location are scattered around the Heartlands, forming a literal and metaphorical triangle of death with Valentine at its apex. These are not simple crime scenes, they are tableaus, staged theatrical performances of violence. The severed heads mounted on pikes, the torsos strung up like butchered hogs, the maps shoved violently into mouths. Every detail is a performative act created by a psychopath who is desperate to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be feared. The graffiti he leaves behind, "Look on my works, behold," invokes Ozymandias, but instead of stone monuments, Lowry builds with flesh and bone. He is the dark reflection of the civilized artist, a man who believes that transcendence can be found in the total desecration of the human form. His background, revealed through letters and environmental clues, paints a classic profile of a budding psychopath. He comes from money, or at least respectability. He is well-spoken, educated, and utterly devoid of empathy. A letter from his mother found in his lair hints at a domineering, perhaps abusive relationship, filled with Oedipal undertones and a desperate need for control. "Edmund, you must be a good boy," she writes, a phrase that likely echoed in his mind as he sharpened his knives. This backstory transforms him from a generic movie monster into a tragic product of Victorian repression. He is the id of the era unleashed, the polite society man who strips away the suit to reveal the beast underneath. His lair, Lucky's cabin, sits to the southwest of town, a burned-out ruin that serves as a grim monument to his psyche. From the outside, it looks like just another abandoned homestead, a common sight in the failing economy of the frontier. But the cellar doors hide a nightmare. Descending into that cellar is a masterclass in horror design. The sudden shift in lighting, the drop in temperature, implied by the condensation, and the overwhelming visual assault of rot. Skulls are arranged on shelves like fine china. Organs are preserved in jars. The darkness is oppressive, forcing the player to use a lantern, which casts long, dancing shadows that make the dead seem to move. It is a stark, terrifying contrast to the open, sunlit fields of the heartland above. It effectively communicates that beneath the pastoral beauty of the West lies a rotting, cancerous core. When Arthur finally confronts Lowry, the scene plays out with a chilling lack of fanfare. There is no grand villain monologue, no chance for redemption, no dialogue wheel to talk him down. Lowry is pure, distilled evil. He attacks not out of desperation, but out of a compulsive need to consume and destroy. He is a predator who sees Arthur not as a man, but as raw material for his next masterpiece. Bringing him to the Valentine sheriff's office leads to a final brutal irony. In a last act of defiance, Lowry attacks Sheriff Malloy, forcing Arthur, or the sheriff, to kill him. His body is left on the floor of the jail, bleeding out into the sawdust. He becomes just another piece of trash to be discarded. The town of Valentine absorbs this horror and moves on with terrifying speed. The sheriff goes back to his affair. The saloon goes back to serving drinks. The monster is dead, but the darkness that created him, the indifference, the cruelty, the isolation, remains woven into the fabric of the town. But if Edmund Lowry Jr. is the monster of the dark, the werewolf of Valentine, then there is another monster, far more insidious because it is invisible. It is microscopic. It is the Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacterium, residing in the lungs of Thomas Downes. The monsters among us in Red Dead Redemption 2 are not always killers with knives. Sometimes they are desperate men taking loans they can't pay, and the unseen forces that punish them. The confrontation at Downes Ranch, which we touched upon as an economic transaction in the previous chapter, must be re-examined here as a biological horror story. Thomas Downes is, in every way, the anti-Lowry. He is a pacifist. He preaches charity in the streets. He tries to stop the fight between Arthur and Tommy. He is a man who believes in the fundamental goodness of humanity. Yet, He kills Arthur Morgan just as surely as a bullet would. This is the tragic poetry of Valentine's lore, the ultimate subversion of the hero's journey. The man who tries to do good, Downs, is destroyed by the system, and in his destruction he destroys the man who enforces the system, Arthur. The transmission of the disease is a moment of intimacy perverted by violence. Arthur beats him, demanding money. Downs, coughing up blood, pleads, and then he spits. It's not an attack, it's a reflex, a symptom. A spray of bloody mist hits Arthur's face. He wipes it away, annoyed but unconcerned. In that split second, the monster enters him. It is a biological curse transmitted through an act of brutality. The bad blood of Valentine, the cursed earth explicitly mentioned in the indigenous lore, effectively manifests as a plague. Arthur becomes a carrier of the town's rot. He leaves Valentine, but Valentine never leaves him. It eats him from the inside out, a slow, agonizing consumption that mirrors the slow death of the West itself. This duality, the spectacular violence of Lowry versus the quiet, invisible violence of TB, defines the horror of Valentine. One you can shoot, the other you cannot. One is a monster you hunt, the other is a monster that hunts you silently in your own breath. There is one final monster worth noting in the Valentine ecosystem, one that bridges the gap between the supernatural and the scientific. The mad scientist implications found in the strange house just west of town, technically closer to Van Horn, but spiritually linked to the weirdness of the region. However, staying strictly within Valentine, we see the echoes of this mutation in the deformities and sicknesses of the general populace. The town attracts the broken. The veteran Mickey, with his missing arm and desperate need for connection, the boy in the gunsmith's basement in Rhodes, a similar theme of captivity, and the general prevalence of mange and disease in the animals. The environment is hostile, it rejects health. It breeds monsters, both human and microscopic, and feeds them to the grinder of civilization. The environment is hostile, it rejects health, it breeds monsters, both human and microscopic, and feeds them to the grinder of civilization. Lowry's madness is not just in his mind, it is etched into the landscape. The first clue of his American Dreams map is located under the railway bridge just south of Valentine. To find it, you must walk through a literal mixture of mud and blood as a severed torso is strung up on the wooden supports. The map piece is shoved into the mouth of a severed head. The intimacy of retrieving it, Arthur has to pry the jaw open, is visceral. The map itself is drawn in a jagged, childish hand, but the geography is precise. It triangulates the location of Lucky's cabin, proving that Lowry isn't a chaotic killer, he is a planning one. But if Lowry represents the unburied dead, the Valentine churchyard represents the buried ones and the stories they tell. Walk through the graveyard behind the small white church. Read the tombstones. They're not procedurally generated, they are handwritten epitaphs. Here lies John Doe, he drew too slow. A cliché perhaps, but one that reinforces the town's violent code. Sarah, beloved wife, died of the fever. A reminder of the fragility of life. Unmarked wooden crosses. These are the indigenous dead, or the poor, or the outlaws. They outnumber the stone markers. The church itself is often locked, a symbol of spiritual unavailability. The priest is rarely seen. God has left Valentine, leaving the dead to rot in the mud. There is also the mysterious serpent mound just west of Valentine near the river, a raised earthwork in the shape of a snake. Is it an indigenous burial site? A cult marker? The game never explains it. It sits there, silent and ancient, watching the trains go by. It suggests that the wrongness of the region predates the town, predates the curse, predates humanity itself, and eventually this wrongness consumes the town entirely. The Van der Linde gang's departure from Valentine is not a clean break. It is a violent ejection. The shootout with Cornwall's men allows them to escape with their lives, but they leave behind a town that is permanently scarred by their presence. The innocent livestock town they arrived in has been robbed, shot up, and traumatized. The bank has been looted. The saloon is riddled with bullet holes. The auction yard is a crime scene. But does the town die? No. Valentine is resilient, perhaps unnaturally so. It absorbs the violence, buries the bodies in the ever-present mud, and continues its muddy, grinding existence. The gang moves on to Lemoyne, swapping the mud for the swamp, but Valentine remains, a fixed point in the chaos of the frontier. In the epilogue set in 1907, 8 years after the events of the main story, we return to Valentine with John Marston. This return is crucial for understanding the town's true nature. If the curse of Valentine was real, one might expect the town to be a ghost town, abandoned and reclaimed by the earth. But instead, we find it thriving, or at least persisting. The atmosphere, however, has shifted. The frantic, booming energy of 1899 is gone, replaced by a quieter, more melancholy pragmaticism. The town feels settled. The mud is still there, but it feels less like a living enemy and more like a permanent fact of life. There are physical changes, subtle but significant. New buildings have been erected. The hotel that was under construction is now finished, or at least further along, symbolising the slow, inevitable march of progress. The doctor's office, once the site of the violent O'Driscoll operation, has changed hands, or at least changed policies. The steel door is gone, the back room cleared out. That specific chapter of corruption has closed, likely to be replaced by a more mundane, bureaucratic form of graft. The town has grown up, losing some of its wild edge in exchange for stability. The most poignant moments in the epilogue come from the characters we encounter. We find Sadie Adler in Smithfield's saloon. She is no longer the grieving widow of Coulter, shivering in a blanket. She's a bounty hunter, a hardened professional who fits perfectly into the violent ecosystem of the town. Her presence in the saloon, the same saloon where Arthur fought Tommy, where he drank with Lenny, circles the narrative back to its beginning. But now she is the one commanding the room. She meets John not as a damsel, but as an equal, perhaps even a superior in the trade of violence. Her transformation is a testament to the town's influence. Valentine doesn't kill everyone, it turns the survivors into killers. Sadie found her new self in the crucible of the Heartlands, and Valentine is where she conducts her business. Then there is the heartbreaking encounter with Mary Beth Gaskill at the train station. Of all the gang members, Mary Beth was the dreamer, the writer of romances. Finding her at the station, waiting for a train to leave, is a heavy symbolic beat. She is escaping. She has become a successful writer, under a pseudonym, turning the tragedy of the gang into fiction. She is the lucky one. She managed to transmute the horror of Valentine into art, and in doing so she bought her ticket out. Her conversation with John is awkward, tinged with the pain of the past. "We were fools, weren't we?" implies a realization that their time in Valentine, their time believing in Dutch, was a fever dream. As she boards the train, she leaves the mud behind forever, achieving the escape that Arthur never could. We also meet Mickey, the one-armed veteran again. He is older, greyer, and his mind has deteriorated further. He doesn't quite remember Arthur, but he remembers the feeling of kindness. He represents the town's memory, fragmented, confused, but holding on to the scars of the past. He is a living ghost, haunting the streets of a town that has no use for him. So what is the final verdict on Valentine? Is it cursed? Is it evil? Or is it simply America? The Valentine of 1907 offers a visual thesis on the death of the Wild West. Look at the new construction. The houses appearing on the outskirts are not the rough-hewn log cabins of 1899. They are catalogue homes, pre-cut timber kits ordered from Sears or similar companies. They represent the standardization of the frontier. The individuality of the mud town is being replaced by the uniformity of the suburbs. The hotel is finished, and it looks generic. It looks like Blackwater. It looks like St. Denis. Ideally, civilization is boring, and Valentine is becoming boring. But the violence remains, just channeled differently. Sadie Adler is the avatar of this new violence. Her bounty hunting missions in the epilogue are not about justice, they are about extermination. She takes John to the canyon to hunt down a bounty. Listen to the dialogue. She speaks of death with a casual familiarity that scares even John. He's a bad man, John, worst kind. She justifies her bloodlust with a moral code that is absolute and terrifying. She has become the thing she hated, a killer who roams the heartlands. But unlike the O'Driscolls, she has a badge, or a license. She is the lawful evil that replaced the chaotic evil. And if the player killed Sheriff Malloy in 1899, he is gone, replaced by a generic lawman with none of the personality. The game logic dictates that the role must be filled, but the narrative logic suggests that Malloy was a unique artifact of a specific time. His replacement is a bureaucrat, a man who follows the rules, who doesn't have affairs with married women, that we know of, who doesn't strangle people upstairs. The town is safer, yes, but it is also less human. The Curse of Valentine was never really about ghosts or ancient burial grounds, although those elements provide a rich mythological texture. The true curse is the inescapable nature of the West itself. The town is a trap. It promises civilization, a church, a bank, a sheriff, but it delivers savagery to those who seek it. It lures men in with the promise of money, livestock, pleasure, whiskey, and order, law, and then traps them in a cycle of debt, addiction, and violence. The mud never really washes off. It stains the soul. Valentine stands as the ultimate monument to the American frontier in Red Dead Redemption 2. Unlike St. Denis, which is corrupted by industry, or Rhodes, which is corrupted by history, slavery, Valentine is corrupted by nature, human nature. It is a place where basic human greed and violence are allowed to fester in a petri dish of mud. It is dirty, it is violent, it is corrupt, and it is terrifyingly resilient. It survives fire, plague, and shootout. It will be there long after John Marston is dead, long after the cowboys are gone. It will eventually be paved over, the mud hidden beneath asphalt, but the bones will still be there. But the story of Valentine does not end with the credits of the game. To truly understand the town's place in the pantheon of digital horror, we must step outside the narrative and look at the code itself, at the fictional reality that exists in the files, but not in the gameplay. The curse extends into the development process, into the cut content and the hidden data that suggests Valentine was originally intended to be even darker. Data miners have uncovered models and scripts that point to a river monster questline that was cut from the final game. The model, a grotesque, mutated, catfish-like creature, is linked in the files to the Dakota River, specifically the bend near Valentine. Was this intended to be a physical manifestation of the curse? A creature born of the pollution from the livestock yards and the blood of the massacre? Its removal leaves a narrative void that the community has filled with speculation, creating a phantom lore that is just as powerful as the canonical text. Similarly, there are audio files for a giant that were seemingly meant to trigger near the Lucky's cabin area, further reinforcing the fable-like quality of the region's horror. Furthermore, there is the mystery of the missing princess, Isabeau Katharina Zinsmeister. Her wanted poster is a staple of the Van Horn fence, but the code linkages for her reward spawning are strangely tied to the Valentine Sheriff's Office logic. This suggests that at one point her story might have brought us back to the Mud Town, perhaps implying that she was another victim of the serial killer, or perhaps something even worse. The fact that this content is broken or missing adds to the town's aura of incompleteness, of a history that has been erased or lost. This sense of undeath transitions perfectly into the Red Dead Online experience, which provides the final metatextual chapter of the Valentine saga. In the chaotic, lawless world of online multiplayer, Valentine has gained a reputation as the griefer's paradise. It is the most common site for player-initiated massacres. Why? Is it just the central location, or is it the kill box architecture? The main street is a perfect shooting gallery. The rooftops offer sniper nests. The saloon is a choke point. The level designers, intentionally or not, built a perfect arena for death. When players log in and immediately ride to Valentine to start a shootout, they are unknowingly role-playing the curse. They become the demons. They become the O'Driscolls. The curse of Valentine breaks the fourth wall, infecting the players themselves with the desire for violence. The mud demands blood, and the players sitting in their comfortable chairs in the real world are more than happy to provide it. The glitched lobbies where piles of skinned cougars appear in the street, the modders raining explosive skeletons from the sky. In the context of the lore, these are just the final apocalyptic manifestations of the town's evil. The simulation is breaking down under the weight of the sins committed there. But before we reach our final verdict, we must examine the women of Valentine, for they are perhaps the most overlooked and yet most revealing inhabitants of this cursed town. In a world dominated by masculine violence, by the swagger of cowboys and the brutality of outlaws, the women of Valentine exist in a liminal space, visible yet invisible, essential yet disposable. They are the silent witnesses to the town's depravity, and their stories, told through fragments of dialogue and environmental detail, paint a portrait of survival that is both heartbreaking and defiant. Consider the prostitutes who work the upper floors of Smithfield Saloon. They are not named in the game's credits, not given elaborate backstories or personal quests. They exist as atmosphere, a set dressing for the masculine fantasy of the Wild West. But observe them closely, watch their animations. They lean against door frames with a practiced weariness, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. They call out to passing men with voices that are simultaneously inviting and hollow. "Looking for a good time, mister?" The question is rhetorical. They know the answer. They know what men come to Valentine for, and they know that their bodies are just another commodity in this livestock town, traded and consumed like the cattle in the yards below. The economics of their existence are brutal. A night with a prostitute costs a few dollars, roughly the same as a meal at the saloon, less than a night at the hotel. This pricing structure is not accidental. It communicates the town's valuation of female bodies: cheap, accessible, interchangeable. The women themselves are trapped in a system that offers no escape. Where would they go? The frontier offers few opportunities for women without family, without capital, without the protection of a man. The saloon is their prison, but it is also their shelter. It is the only place that will have them. One specific encounter illuminates this tragedy with devastating clarity. If Arthur lingers near the back stairs of Smithfield's, he may witness a confrontation between a prostitute and a client who refuses to pay. The dialogue is sharp, desperate. "You owe me, you bastard!" she screams. The man laughs, pushes her aside. "You ain't worth what I paid." The violence is casual, almost bored, and no one intervenes. Not the bartender, not the other patrons, not the law. In Valentine, a woman's body is her only currency, and when that currency is devalued, she has nothing. The encounter ends with the woman retreating, upstairs, defeated. The man orders another drink. The piano player keeps playing. The town absorbs the cruelty and moves on. Then there are the respectable women of Valentine, the wives, the widows, the shopkeepers' daughters. They occupy a different stratum of the town's social hierarchy, but their lives are no less constrained. They are defined by their relationships to men, someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's property. They sweep porches and hang laundry and pretend not to hear the gunshots. They attend church on Sunday and pray for deliverance from a town that offers none. Their respectability is a performance, a constant negotiation with a society that demands their virtue while surrounding them with vice. The woman who runs the general store counter, when the male owner is absent, is a study in quiet endurance. Her dialogue is clipped, efficient. She doesn't engage in small talk. She doesn't smile. She processes transactions with the mechanical precision of someone who has learned that emotional investment is a luxury she cannot afford. Is she the owner's wife, his daughter, his employee? The game never clarifies, and perhaps that ambiguity is the point. Her identity is subsumed by her function. She's a pair of hands that takes money and gives change. In Valentine, that is enough. And then there is the widow Downs, Edith Downs, whose story intersects so tragically with Arthur's. After Thomas Downs dies, from the tuberculosis that he will transmit to Arthur, or from the beating Arthur gives him, or from the crushing weight of debt, the cause of death is deliberately unclear. Edith is left with nothing. The farm fails, the creditors circle, and she is forced into the very profession that the respectable women of Valentine pretend doesn't exist. If Arthur encounters her later in the game, in St. Denis she is working as a prostitute, her fall from grace complete. The trajectory is devastating. From farmer's wife to widow to whore, each step downward dictated by the economic machinery that Valentine represents. She is the human cost of Strauss's ledger, the flesh and blood consequence of the gang's business. Her son, Archie Downs, becomes a symbol of inherited trauma. He watches his father die, watches his mother's degradation, and he carries that poison forward. When he confronts Arthur in St. Denis, his rage is incandescent. "You killed my father," he screams, and he is right in every way that matters. Arthur didn't pull a trigger, but he set in motion the chain of events that destroyed the Downs family. The curse of Valentine extends beyond the town limits, following its victims wherever they flee. Edith and Archie Downs are refugees from the Heartlands, but they carry the Heartlands' rot with them. There is no escape. The women of Valentine also include those who exist on the margins of the margins, the indigenous women whose presence is implied but rarely shown, the black women who would have occupied the lowest rungs of the town's racial hierarchy, the immigrant women who came west seeking opportunity and found only exploitation. These women are ghosts in the game's narrative, their stories untold, their suffering unwitnessed. But their absence is itself a form of testimony. Valentine's history is written by the victors, and the victors were white men with guns. The women who didn't fit that narrative were erased, their bones joining the indigenous dead beneath the mud. Beyond the women, we must also examine the infrastructure that connects Valentine to the wider world, the train station. This modest wooden platform situated at the edge of town is far more than a transportation hub. It is the umbilical cord that ties Valentine to civilization, the artery through which money, goods, and people flow. And like everything else in this town, it is stained with blood and compromise. The train station represents the future that is coming, whether Valentine wants it or not. The railroad is the great equalizer of the West, the iron horse that will eventually render the cowboy obsolete. Every train that pulls into Valentine brings newspapers from the East, manufactured goods from the factories, and passengers who look at the muddy streets with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. These visitors are tourists in a dying world, come to see the authentic West before it disappears. They take photographs, they buy souvenirs, they board the next train out, grateful to leave the mud behind. But the train also brings danger. It brings Pinkertons, it brings Cornwall's men, it brings the long arm of the law that will eventually crush the Van der Linde gang. The train is not neutral. It is an instrument of corporate power, owned and operated by men like Cornwall, who see the West not as a frontier to be explored, but as a resource to be extracted. Every rail tie is a nail in the coffin of the old ways. Every locomotive whistle is a death knell for men like Dutch and Arthur, who believe they can outrun progress. The station master is a minor character, but his presence is significant. He is a company man, a functionary of the railroad corporation. He wears a uniform. He follows schedules. He represents the bureaucratization of the West, the replacement of individual initiative with corporate procedure. When Arthur buys a ticket from him, the transaction is impersonal, efficient. There is no haggling, no negotiation. The price is fixed. The destination is predetermined. The train will leave at the appointed time, regardless of what dramas are unfolding in the town. The railroad operates on its own logic, indifferent to the human chaos around it. The trains themselves are marvels of industrial engineering, and the game renders them with loving detail. The steam engines belch smoke and fire. The wheels grind against the rails with a metallic shriek. The passenger cars are divided by class. First class for the wealthy, with plush seats and private compartments. Coach class for everyone else, with hard wooden benches and the smell of unwashed bodies. This class division is a microcosm of the society that is emerging, a society stratified by wealth rather than by frontier virtues like courage or skill. In the Old West, a man could rise or fall based on his own abilities. In the New West, Your seat on the train is determined by your bank account. The robberies that the Van der Linde gang commits on these trains are acts of rebellion against this new order. When Arthur and the boys hold up a Cornwall train, they are not just stealing money, they are striking back at the system that is displacing them. The train represents everything Dutch claims to hate: corporate power, industrial capitalism, the commodification of human life. But the irony is that the gang needs the train's money to fund their escape. They are parasites on the very system they despise, unable to survive without feeding on its wealth. This contradiction is at the heart of the gang's tragedy, and it is embodied in the Valentine train station, where the old world and the new world meet in an uneasy temporary truce. We must also venture beyond the town limits to examine the ranches and homesteads that dot the heartlands, for Valentine does not exist in isolation. It is the hub of a wheel whose spokes extend into the surrounding countryside, connecting the town to a network of agricultural enterprises that feed its economy. These ranches are the source of the livestock that gives Valentine its identity, and they are also sites of their own particular tragedies. The Downs Ranch, which we have already discussed in the context of Arthur's fatal encounter with Thomas Downs, is the most narratively significant of these homesteads. But it is not the only one. Scattered across the heartlands are dozens of small farms and ranches, each struggling to survive in an environment that seems designed to break them. The soil is poor, the weather is unpredictable, the market prices fluctuate wildly, and always there are predators, human and animal, waiting to take what little they have. Emerald Ranch, to the east of Valentine, is perhaps the most mysterious of these agricultural outposts. It is a prosperous operation, unusually so for the region, with well-maintained buildings and healthy livestock. But something is wrong. The workers are sullen, uncommunicative. The owner, Eugen Wegner, is never seen during the day, and there are rumours, whispered in the saloons of Valentine, of a woman kept prisoner, of a tragedy that has poisoned the ranch's prosperity. The full story is revealed through patient investigation. Wegner's daughter, Miriam, accidentally killed her fiancé, and Wegner has kept her locked away ever since, hiding her crime and her existence from the world. Emerald Ranch is a prison disguised as a farm, its wealth built on a foundation of guilt and secrecy. It is Valentine's shadow self, a place where the town's themes of imprisonment and hidden sin are made literal. Carmody Dell, another ranch in the region, offers a different kind of tragedy. Here, the violence is not hidden, but celebrated. The ranch hands are rough men, quick to anger, quicker to draw. Cattle rustling is common. Disputes are settled with fists and guns. The ranch operates on the edge of legality, its prosperity dependent on a willingness to bend or break the rules. When Arthur visits Carmody Dell, he is entering a world that mirrors his own, a world where strength is the only law and weakness is punished without mercy. The ranch hands recognize him as one of their own, a fellow predator. They offer him work, or they challenge him to fights. Either way, the interaction reinforces the Heartland's fundamental truth. This is a place where only the strong survive. The smaller homesteads are even more precarious. Single families, often just a man and his wife, trying to carve a living from the unforgiving earth. Their cabins are crude, their possessions meagre. They are one bad harvest, one sick cow, one visit from outlaws away from ruin. When Arthur encounters these homesteaders, the interactions are often tinged with desperation. They offer him food, shelter, information, anything to curry favour with a man who could destroy them on a whim. Their hospitality is not generosity, it is survival strategy. They have learned that in the heartlands, it is better to befriend the wolves than to be eaten by them. These ranches and homesteads form the economic base that supports Valentine's existence. Without them, there would be no livestock to auction, no money to spend in the saloons, no reason for the town to exist at all. But the relationship is parasitic rather than symbiotic. Valentine takes from the countryside without giving back. The ranchers sell their cattle at prices set by the auction house, prices that barely cover their costs. They buy supplies at the general store at prices inflated by the town's monopoly. They drink away their sorrows at Smithfield's, enriching the saloon owner while impoverishing themselves. The town is a vampire, feeding on the lifeblood of the surrounding region, growing fat while its hosts grow thin. This economic vampirism extends to the labour practices of the livestock yards themselves. The men who work the pens and chutes are not the romantic cowboys of Western mythology. They are labourers, paid by the day, with no job security and no benefits. They work in conditions that are dangerous and degrading, surrounded by the stench of animal waste and the constant threat of injury. A kick from a panicked steer can break bones. A slip in the mud can mean a trampling, and if a worker is injured, he is simply replaced. There is always another desperate man willing to take his place. The auction itself is a spectacle of controlled chaos. The auctioneer's rapid-fire patter, the bellowing of cattle, the shouting of bidders, it is a sensory assault that mirrors the violence of the town. But beneath the chaos is a ruthless efficiency. Every animal is assessed, valued, sold. Every transaction is recorded. The auction house takes its cut from every sale, skimming profit from both buyer and seller. It is capitalism in its rawest form, the reduction of living creatures to units of exchange. And the men who run it, men like Maurice Peyton, who happily fences stolen sheep, are the priests of this bloody religion, officiating over the sacrifice of flesh for gold. The relationship between Valentine and its hinterland also illuminates the town's role in the broader narrative of Western expansion. Valentine is not just a town, it is a beachhead, an outpost of civilization, pushing into territory that was, until recently, indigenous land. The ranches that surround it are the front lines of this conquest. Each homestead a claim staked against the original inhabitants. The cattle that graze the heartlands are grazing on land that once supported buffalo herds, herds that were systematically exterminated to starve the native peoples into submission. Every steak served at Smithfield's saloon is, in a sense, seasoned with genocide. This history is not explicitly stated in the game, but it haunts every frame. The Curse of Valentine is not just a ghost story, it is a historical fact dressed in supernatural clothing. The land remembers what was done to claim it, and the land is angry. The mud that clings to everything is not just dirt, it is the eat of the dead, the eat of the buffalo, the eat of a way of life that was murdered so that men like the ranchers of the heartlands could raise their cattle in peace. There is no peace, there never was. The violence of the present is just the echo of the violence of the past, reverberating through time, staining everything it touches. And what of the animals themselves? In a town built on the livestock trade, the cattle and sheep and horses are more than economic units. They are fellow sufferers, creatures caught in the same grinding machinery that crushes the human inhabitants. The game's attention to animal behaviour and welfare is remarkable. Horses can be bonded with, named, mourned when they die. Cattle low mournfully as they are herded to slaughter. Dogs bark and whine and seek affection. The animals of Valentine are not props, they are characters, albeit voiceless ones. The treatment of animals in Valentine reflects the treatment of humans. Both are commodified, exploited, discarded when no longer useful. The horse that carries Arthur through countless adventures can be sold for a few dollars when a better mount becomes available. The cattle that represent a rancher's life savings can be rustled, slaughtered, rendered into nothing. The parallel is intentional. In the moral universe of Red Dead Redemption 2, the line between human and animal is blurred, and Valentine is the place where that blurring is most evident. We are all livestock here, waiting for the auction block or the slaughterhouse. The stray dogs that wander Valentine streets are particularly poignant. They are ownerless, masterless, surviving on scraps and the occasional kindness of strangers. Arthur can pet them, feed them, but he cannot save them. They will continue to wander the muddy streets long after he is gone, scavenging and suffering. They are the town's conscience, perhaps, mute witnesses to its cruelty, asking nothing, expecting nothing, receiving nothing. In a town full of predators, they are the ultimate prey. So in the end, Valentine is a place where dreams go to die. Dutch's dream of a utopia died here, exposed as a fraud by Cornwall. Arthur's dream of a life beyond loyalty died here, infected by Downs. The indigenous dream of a homeland died here, erased by the town itself. And the player's dream of a peaceful cowboy life dies here, gunned down by a 12-year-old with a Carcano rifle. The only winner in Valentine, the only entity that truly thrives, is the Undertaker, and perhaps the mud itself which swallows them all in the end.